Past midnight, a lonely Minnesota highway stretches ahead, and in the distance, a white light blooms, hovering low over the asphalt. Johnson turns towards it, heart pounding. The light, it rushes forward, then explodes through his windshield in a storm of glass and searing pain. When he wakes up, he's injured, and his squad car is battered, and every clock around him is exactly 14 minutes slow. What force could hit him with such power, then vanish without a trace? Let's retrace the echoes, if you dare. Northwestern, Minnesota, August 27th of 1979. It's the hour before the dawn drapes the prairie in darkness. A black endless sky pressing down on fields that seem to stretch for miles. You see, there's no moon to guide the way, no wind to stir the grass, just a narrow strip of asphalt cutting through farmland that seems to have no edge. Now, Deputy Sheriff Val Johnson, he sits behind the wheel of his Ford LTD patrol car, and he's rolling steadily along County Road number 5. The headlights, they push outward into the night, their beams swallowed whole just a few hundred feet away. On the dashboard, the clock, it glows softly, 1:40 a.m. It's hours into his shift, no calls, no traffic, only the quiet hum of his engine. And that other thing, that faint, uneasy feeling that, with the night, it might be watching him back. He reaches an intersection. The tires give a very low, steady hum as they cross the pavement seam. He turns south onto State Highway 220, not knowing that choice, well, it will stay with him for the rest of his life. In less than 30 minutes, something will strike his cruiser, and when it's over, every single clock in the world will be wrong. It begins with a light in the darkness. Up ahead, just beyond the reach of his headlights, a faint glow, it hangs over the asphalt. It's small at first, no larger than a dinner plate, and it's hovering low, motionless. Now the light, it doesn't flicker, it doesn't waver, it just simply waits. Johnson leans forward in his seat. His eyes, they're squinting against the darkness. Could be a spotlight. Could be a downed aircraft trying to make an emergency landing on an empty street. He adjusts his wheel, and he eases onto State Highway 220, lining himself up with whatever it is. Now the glow, it remains exactly where it was, as if it's watching him approach. He slows the patrol car. The hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of the tires, the only sound in the night. No headlights in the distance, no taillights disappearing over the horizon. And then the light moves, not drifting like a lantern in the wind, not slowly moving like a search beam. It surges forward, fast. In the time it takes to draw a single breath, it comes straight at him.
Human, we traveled light years for one thing.
Subscribe
And click
like before the countdown ends.
The light reaches him in a single impossible rush, and the inside of the patrol car, what erupts in blinding white. It's so bright, you can feel it searing into his eyes, leaving ghostly shapes burned into his vision. A deafening crack as the windshield gives way. Shards of glass, they now shatter inward, falling across the dash and the seat. Something slams into the hood, not a scrape or a glancing blow, but a solid, punishing hit that seems to fold the steel in on itself. The antenna, it snaps off right at the mount, almost like there was a sound of it striking a wire. The windshield, it fractures straight in front of his seat in a perfect circle, spiderweb lines glinting from the flash. Now Johnson, his hands come up from instincts, but you see the force. They'd already taken control. The car lifts up for just a fraction of the second, then drifts sideways as though it's being pushed by something he can't see. The world tilts. His stomach shifts into his chest. A burst of light inside his head. Like all the stars are detonating at the same time, and in silence. No road, no light, nothing at all. When Val Johnson opened his eyes, well, the world around him, it was completely wrong. See, the patrol car had now sat at an awkward angle across the highway, as if it spun sideways and, well, just simply stopped. The night air, it drifted through that spider web of cracks in his windshield. Taste of metal. It was sitting heavy in his mouth. His vision was blurred. Every moment sent a dull ache through his head and across his jaw. He blinks hard and tries to rub his eyes so he can try to bring the dashboard into focus. See, the glowing numbers of the car's digital clock pulled him back because, you see, they're not right. 14 minutes is gone. But the interesting thing is both the dash clock and his watch on his hand, they're both exactly at the same delay. They were perfectly in sync before the shift even began, and now, as if by some form of a weird supernatural agreement, they've both fallen behind. Johnson leans back in his seat, breathing slow, trying to replay the last thing that he remembers, the burst of light, the violent jolt, the glass breaking around him, and, well, then nothing. Somewhere in the darkness, 14 minutes of his life, they vanished. And in that very empty stretch of highway, there's no sign of what took them. But there will be. Headlights appear in the distance, growing brighter as another patrol unit closes in. Deputy Greg Winskowski. He steps out into the cold night air, scanning the empty stretch of Highway 220. You see, the scene, it didn't make any sense. Val Johnson's squad car was sitting sideways across the asphalt as if it had been spun and just left to rest exactly where it landed. But here's the thing. No skid marks would suggest that there was any kind of braking. No debris that would explain an impact. The windshield is shattered outward from a single circular point in front of the driver's seat. One headlight, it was blown apart. The metal skin of the hood, it was dented in, not crumpled, but almost like it was struck. And both radio antennas, thick steel whips, are bent sharp, almost as though they had been folded by hand. Inside Johnson, he slumped into the driver's seat, eyes bloodshot and raw. Even the beam of a flashlight would make him flinch. A dark bruise swells along his forehead. When the deputy asks what happened, Johnson's voice is weak but certain. It wasn't a vehicle. I don't know what it was. He repeats the phrase more than once, as if the words are holding back something worse. While waiting for the ambulance, the deputy notices a detail that will puzzle investigators for decades. The damage to the antennas, they don't match any kind of known collision pattern. I mean, they're not simply bent, they're twisted at the base as though hit by a force that wasn't entirely solid. It's a clue, but not one that fits neatly into any report. At Warren Hospital, the lights are so harsh against the darkness of Highway 220. Johnson sits upright on an examination table, the paper sheet beneath him crinkling with every movement. A doctor peers into his eyes, and he pauses. See, the bloodshot darkness, it's not caused by dust or even broken glass, it's something else, an irritation that looks eerily familiar to a welder's burn. That's typically what happens when someone's welding and the arc of that ultraviolet light hits the eyes without any form of protection. His pupils, they tighten sluggishly. He tries to pull away from the beam. You see, he can't look at anything that bright. But besides the eye injury, there's no deep cuts. There's no broken bones. There's just a little bit of swelling on his forehead. He does have 2 cracked teeth, they believe from when his jaw clenched down at the moment of impact. The doctor, he makes notes of all the injuries, but there's nothing here that would explain how a patrol car could be damaged so badly, while the driver suffers so little physical trauma. And there's nothing that explains the missing time. In the hallway, The deputy mutters to another, 14 minutes, both clocks. The words hang like they're part of a riddle that no one's even remotely trying to solve. They're probably not even capable of solving. Outside on Highway 220, the car, it sits waiting for the sheriff. And the closer you look, the less sense that anything makes. Now by sunrise, Sheriff Dennis Brekke standing on State Highway 220, boots on the pavement. The air, it smells faintly like dust and cooling metal. And then there's Johnson's patrol car. It's now moved to the shoulder. And the skid marks, or should I say lack of skid marks, they tell their own story. From the moment of impact, the vehicle rolled more than 800 feet before coming to a rest. That's 266 yards roughly. No sign of braking, no sign of swerving to try to avoid an obstacle. It's as though something had pushed it and then let go. The windshield, it showed a very clear circular movement right in front of the driver's seat, but the glass fragments, they scattered inside the car, as though whatever it was came from outside the vehicle. Both radio antennas, they were also examined. Their thick steel bases were bent into sharp angles, twisted in a way that Brekke had never seen any kind of vehicle collision in the past. Not bent as though from an object, but distorted at the very point where the metal meets the mount. Now Brekke checks every obvious source. Nearby airports, the FAA, the Air Force. No aircraft in that area. No night operations. No reports of emergency landings. Perhaps a meteor. Well, there's no craters, no debris, no scorched earth. And let's be honest, meteors, they don't travel horizontally 8 feet off the ground. With no conventional leads, Brekke reaches out to the Center of UFO Studies in Illinois, and within days, investigator Allan Hendry is in Marshall County photographing the damage and interviewing Johnson. Now Hendry's puzzled. See, there's too many small details. When added together, they refuse to fit into a normal explanation. This is a good case, he tells the local reporters, the kind with a witness, physical evidence, and with no easy answer. And yet, some of that evidence, like the twisted antennas, they suggest a force that might not have been solid at all. It's a thought that no one says out loud, but it lingers. Now, it doesn't take very long for the story to escape Marshall County. See, the local papers, they print headlines about the UFO car. And within days, the Associated Press, well, they pick it up, carrying the case from Minnesota newsrooms to, well, national headlines. Reporters, they began calling the sheriff's office, then the phone at Johnson's house, then the neighbors. He appears on television, bright studio lights replacing the darkness of Highway 220, retelling the moment that the light rushed at him. And at first, he speaks plainly as if reciting a report, but the questions, they never stop coming. Radio stations, morning shows, late night talk segments. For the public, it's a curiosity. For Johnson's family, it's a siege. His wife, Roseanne, was answering call after call, and all while trying to take care of their infant child, and the constant ringing started wearing on her voice and on her quiet life. Johnson began turning down interviews, not because the story changed, but because it wasn't attention that he wanted. When asked if he would take a polygraph, he abruptly refused, not in defiance, but with a very simple explanation. It would only satisfy, in his words, people with morbid curiosity. He isn't chasing belief or headlines. He knows what happened to him that night, and he's content to let the rest of the world wrestle with it. Now, normally a damaged patrol car would be repaired or would be sent to a scrapyard, but Brekke, he makes a very different call. He argues with the county commissioner that this one should be preserved exactly as it is. Every crack in the windshield, every dent in the hood, every twisted inch of steel antenna. See, the UFO car, as the paper named it, it was retired from service. Now, eventually, it was donated to the Marshall County Historical Society, and for years, it would sit stored away in a barn, gathering dust. Its story shared only in passing. But you see, time, it didn't bury this case. It only sharpens it. By the late 2000s, the visitors, they began asking about it, some traveling hundreds of miles just to stand in front of it. Now, they leaned close to the cracked glass, tracing the jagged patterns without touching. They studied the bent antennas, trying to imagine what force could possibly do that. The museum, they put on display as their centerpiece, and for those who walked through the doors, the car became more than just an artifact. It's a physical link to a night that no one can fully explain, even without witnesses, even without the light. The damage? It speaks for itself. 40 years later, in the summer of 2019, the town of Warren, they decide to embrace a story that once scared them. They organize an anniversary celebration. Main Street fills with food vendors and music and family. Children race through the crowd in these shiny green alien costumes, and a stage it's set up for a dramatic reenactment of Johnson's radio call. When the moment comes, the voice booms through the loudspeakers for all to hear. Something attacked my car. It wasn't a vehicle. I don't know what the hell it was. For the locals, it's a mixture of pride and playfulness. The UFO car, it had gone from evidence in an unsolved case to a piece of hometown folklore. But one person, they were missing from the celebration. Val Johnson, he was now living in another part of Wisconsin very quietly, and he declined the invitation. When asked about it from his friends, he sometimes smiles and says, "I saw a ball of light. I drove towards it and suddenly it was in the car with me." He'll pause and then add, "It's unexplainable, and it will remain so." See, for him, the mystery is not something to live with. It's not something to solve. But for everyone else, the light on Highway 220, it still burns in their imagination. Now, some see the Val Johnson incident as one of the most compelling UFO cases ever recorded, but the skeptics, they're a little less convinced. You see, their strongest theory, and also probably the most simplest, is Johnson may have just dozed off the wheel. Hours into a silent shift, you got empty roads, and let's be honest, it's not unheard of. A moment of micro-sleep could have ended with him waking up to a bright light, possibly like a meteor streaking across the horizon line, or the glare of a distant vehicle's high beams. In that state of confusion, the mind, it kind of fills in the rest. But that theory doesn't explain everything. There's no debris, no sign that he struck another vehicle, and the damage to the antennas, they're oddly bent at the base. It doesn't match a typical roadside collision. Others point to something known as ball lightning, a rare glowing sphere of plasma, capable of moving erratically and releasing bursts of electrical energy. A close pass could have possibly blinded Johnson, blown the headlight, and even disrupted the car's electronics. You see, ball lightning is fleeting, and scientists admit that it's so rare that the odds of it hitting and moving a car is almost impossible to calculate. Then there's the misidentification theory. On flat prairie highways, lights, they kind of play tricks. Temperature layers in the air, they can bend and magnify headlights, creating even mirages that seem to float above the ground. Now, a far-off truck, distorted by the heat haze, it might appear to be hovering in place and then rushing forward when the distance would close. But see, for believers, these explanations, they ignore one chilling fact. Both clocks, they stopped. Now, for those that believe the Val Johnson story, well, this one, it kind of takes center stage. It's one of the very few rare cases where there's physical evidence, more than just the usual lights in the sky or the blurred photographs. The damage to the patrol car, that's undeniable. The windshield fracture, it's almost like it's pushed out. Yet everything else is showing that there's some force that was pushing in. We're also talking about the two very thick steel radio antennas that are bent very sharply at the base. In no way could this have happened from a roadside collision. A headlight's blown, a hood dented as though it was struck squarely by something solid, yet there's no debris, no paint transfer, no obvious culprit. Then there's Johnson himself. From his first radio call to interviews decades later, his descriptions never changed. He never claims that he saw a flying saucer or even an alien being. Never tried to profit from any kind of the events either. If anything, the attention brought him nothing but trouble. And still, the details, they remain exactly the same. Investigators, they took the case very seriously. Now, the Center of UFO Studies, they sent Allan Hendry, a researcher known for debunking weak cases. Now, Hendry left Marshall County calling it a good case, the kind with witness credibility and, well, physical clues that defy normal explanation. On top of all that, a Honeywell engineer examined the car. He searched for any kind of electrical scorch marks or mechanical faults, and he found no single earthly cause that could have explained any of the damage. Now, some of it, he said, matched what might happen if the vehicle had been struck by a burst of powerful energy instead of a solid object. For believers, that's the part that kind of, if anything, causes the puzzle pieces to point away from the ordinary and towards something that we still don't fully understand. And then there's the theory that takes this from strange to impossible. This is always my favorite part of the show, the fringe theories part. I would always love to call myself a fringe theorist. See, for some, they believe that the Val Johnson story has nothing to do with UFOs, not at all. They believe that it's something stranger and far harder to ever prove. One theory suggests that Johnson, maybe he drove into some type of like a time warp, a pocket in reality where the rules, they simply, well, they stopped working. The missing 14 minutes is not because he was unconscious, but time itself paused around him. See, in that moment, they think that the light was not from an aircraft or any kind of UFO at all. They believe that it was a tear between our worlds, and when it closed, it left him battered and disoriented, and back on the highway that had never moved. Others, they point to late Cold War era, when the U.S. was experimenting with advanced weapons behind classified doors. A direct energy beam, microwave or laser, could, in theory, blind a target, could damage equipment, and even stop a clock. If Johnson was caught in a live test, perhaps no one outside a handful of people would have ever been able to know. Then there's a quieter idea, one that comes from the land itself. See, northern Minnesota has its own tales of spirit lights, and they oftentimes appear with no warning, not to guide travelers, but to turn them back. Folklore says they're omens, or guardians of a place where people are not meant to go. If this theory is right, well, the truth was never on Highway 220. It was somewhere else entirely. Now, the light on Highway 220, it didn't just stay in witness accounts and police reports. It slipped quietly into pop culture. You see, fans of the X-Files, much like myself, they'll tell you that the very first episode, it kind of sounds familiar. There's these agents that's investigating strange lights. There's lost time, and a witness who, well, they can't explain what happened. Some see it as a quiet nod to Val Johnson's case. In 2015, Fargo, the television series, set a scene in 1979 Minnesota, and in the middle of a tense standoff, a UFO appears, hovers just long enough to alter the outcome, and vanishes. Now, for those who know the legend, it feels less like fiction and more like a deliberate tip of the hat. And then, back in the real world, See, the UFO cards become the pride of Marshall County Historical Society. Visitors come from all over the country just to stand in front of it, to see the fractured windshield, the dented hood, and those antennas been exactly as they were in 1979. And of course, in 2019, the town of Warren, they turned the mystery into a celebration, talking about food on the streets and children in shiny alien costumes and the loudspeaker replaying Johnson's radio call word for word. It's become folklore, part history, part hometown legend. But pop culture, it doesn't solve the question, what really happened that night? For more than 40 years, the Val Johnson Incident has stood out as one of Minnesota's strangest unsolved cases. A lone deputy, a blinding light, a patrol car left scarred in ways that no one can fully explain. 2 clocks, both marked with the same missing 14 minutes. Was it a freak accident? Maybe a trick of light on an empty highway? Or a moment where reality itself, well, maybe it bent. I want to hear what you think. Drop in the comments your theories as a skeptic or a believer, even someone in between, maybe some of you fringe theorists. You might have one idea that no one's even considered. And be here for the next case that we open when we leave the quiet prairies of Minnesota for a place where the forest has a reputation for keeping secrets. For those who enter don't always leave the same. Until then, keep chasing the echoes, keep questioning the shadows, and whatever you do, don't blink when the light finds you. Well, unless, of course, if it's here on Retraced Echoes, where the only thing speeding towards you is the next mystery. Goodbye.